I want to talk today about four narratives that I believe make for good character. They're four narratives that you can see around you right now. Of course, there are more than that, but I've categorized four of them to kind of help us be able to process the pandemic, the experience that we're all having by being sheltered, the fighting fear, looking at the data or listening to the news or whatever. And I think the Lord wants to help us as a church, especially in this season, as we're experiencing, basically what Daniel, you remember what happened to Daniel. He was visited by an angel, and he had this tremendous revelation. And the angel said to Daniel, "Shut up these words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many will roam to and fro, and knowledge will increase." That's Daniel 12:4. And I think that this is the age that we're living in. I think there's new revelation coming that's been held up for the appropriate time, but this is the fullness of time. And this is an age when people come to and fro. In fact, we were just about ready to go to Africa in April and May, flying to Africa, flying back, going to and fro. And then there is, of course, the internet. It's obvious. The increase of knowledge is just extremely off the planet in what you can find. And so there's so much information flying around, and there's so many opinions, and so many people have a platform to give their opinion, to give their documentary, or to give whatever they think they have that they want to promote. And I think there's value to that. Of course there is. We're using that platform right now, but I think as the church, who is, the church, which is the pillar and the ground of truth, that's what Paul said that we are. We're the house of God. We're the church of God, the pillar and the ground of truth. As the church, we should not be filled with just thousands of opinions, even though we are. And we shouldn't be filled with all kinds of thoughts about this, that, or the other. I think as we come towards the end of the age, the Lord is going to bring us to a common thought. He's going to bring the church into a place of fullness, that the church, the bride of Christ, will be without spot and blemish. And God is going to bring us to a place where we know how to think spiritually, which is both natural and spiritual. We're able to think and make assessment and make judgment in a way that we can understand the times in which we're living. We can understand what's going on. The church needs to learn how to think and stop being lazy and learn about study, investigation, not just the investigation of the heavenlies through prayer, but the investigation of the world that you're living in, because you live in a real world, and it requires a certain amount of study and observation, but you have to know how to do that. If not, you'll be led astray. So I want to just start today's little exercise as I move towards the definition of the four narratives or categories I see that can help you discern what's going on, so that you're not just thinking one thing and somebody else is thinking another. I think there's a way we can dial down into where truth is, because even though we live in an age that considers everything relative, that's not the truth. So, Father, I pray for everyone that's watching right now that you'd give us a sense to be able to attune our hearts to what the Spirit would be saying. And so, I'm going to read to you out of Proverbs 4:5-9. It says, "Get wisdom, get understanding, forget it not, neither decline from the words of my mouth." That's wisdom talking. "Forsake her not, she shall preserve thee. Love her, and she shall keep thee. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with all your getting, get understanding. And exalt her, and she shall promote you. She shall bring you honor. And when thou dost embrace her," I'm reading in the King James, you can tell now, right? "She shall give to you, to your head, an ornament of grace, a crown of glory shall she deliver to thee." And so Here is wisdom. And of course, the Lord Jesus Christ is to us wisdom and sanctification and justification. But wisdom from above is peaceful, gentle, kind. It has depth to it. It has virtue on it. And what I want to share with you today is that you and I need to understand that wisdom is something more than a Bible verse. It's something more than something we receive while we're praying. Wisdom includes having understanding about the reality of the world you're living in. And so I want to make a case today about how we understand the basic tenets of reality. It's very important. This is not something that's unimportant to you. It's as important to you as it is when you get up in the morning and you get in your car and you drive out into the street. And for me, I go out into a cul-de-sac, and I go down to the end of the street, and it's a highway. And I have to look to the left, look to the right, and be careful. And then I pull out. And why do I look to the right and I look to the left? Because at that moment, I understand fact-based reality. I'm not living in la-la land. I'm not living in mystical land. I'm living on the earth. I may be super, but in that moment, I'm natural. And so I look to the left and I look to the right because that is what we do when we understand reality as it really is. Even some of the wildest people who maybe, have the wildest ideas about the way life really is, when it gets right down to it, they too look to the left and look to the right. Why? Because they know that if they pull out in front of another car, they're going to experience some laws of physics. And those laws of physics can not only hurt them, but can kill them. And so how do we know about the laws of physics? Because they're the basic presuppositions of reality as it really is. And so I want to make a case today or restate something that the Bible teaches. And we as the church, who are to be the pillar and the ground of truth, need to be the people who understand what the basic presuppositions are. And that we're able to cut through the noise of the world around us. And we're able to say, hey, wait a minute, I hear what you're saying, but that's not the basic foundation of reality. And so what you're saying is a misrepresentation of reality. You know, we see it in the world we're living in when there are people in the United States and around the world who believe that gender is not biological. It's a state of mind. It's something you discover that you're created as. But that doesn't purport to reality as it really is. Does that make sense? Because in reality, you're male or female. Now, there may be there may be things that are, what's the word? Variations, thank you. There may be variations that are mutations that are not right, that are destructive. But God made male and female. And so we live in a world that wants to say, no, you can be whatever. But the presupposition, the foundational truth of that reality is not real. Abortion is another one of those ideas, to kill babies in their mother's womb for the right of the mother versus the right of the child created in the image of God is a misappropriation of understanding, of reasoning. It's a lot of times we are willing to sacrifice our presuppositions of what is really true because everybody kind of knows what's really true, but we play along because we want to live in a world that sponsors our biases and sponsors our own inklings and the things that we want. And often we're laden with lust and sin, and in so doing, we lean towards things that protect us in a lifestyle. And so understanding how to see basic presuppositions can help you unravel the scramble of noise and of thought all around you and help you have your feet solid on a rock. And I'm going to lead you to this in just a moment, that we need to do this when it comes to even the COVID-19. It needs to be looked at from a place of understanding that has in view presuppositions, reality, data. Now, some people believe that you can't know reality as it really is, but that's not true. And so, how do we know that? Because God became a man. He didn't just send a message down from heaven, but he came into time and space in an earthen vessel. He appeared before men. He walked among them. He ate. He lived. He raised the dead. He healed the sick. But he came to the cross and he gave his body as a sacrifice. He was murdered, tortured. He was killed on that cross. But he had already said, on the third day, I'm going to rise up. Well, wow, that's pretty powerful. How do we know that's going to be reality? Well, the reality is he did. He arose from the dead, and he appeared to his disciples. He appeared to 500. He walked among them for 40 days. He said, when they thought he was a ghost, he said, touch my side. Feel the nail prints in my hands. Does a ghost have flesh and bone as I do? And the idea is, of course not. Then he ate with them. And so what this is if you can see it, it is a basic presupposition that reality is there's a solid reality in the world we're living in. And if we can understand what the presuppositions are, we can understand what life is and how it should really be lived. And so if I tell you that a man and a woman no longer makes up a family, that you could have a man, a woman, and a dog, or you could have a man or you could have two men or three men or two women and one man, that makes up a family, there's something fundamentally wrong with that picture. It doesn't match reality as it really is and as it's been created to be. And so I'm just making that point. So when I first came to the Lord, I spent several years investigating the historicity of the Gospels, because my name is Thomas, which means lover of truth. And so I was in school, I was studying biology, I wanted to be a medical doctor, and I was really getting saved. And I said, how do I know this thing about Jesus raising from the dead is real? How do I know he really lived? And so I went on a quest. The first thing I did is I found out that the study of history has a science to it. There is a factual, fact-based approach to understanding what has happened in the past, that it's not relative. There's a way to uncover and to know things, but it takes work, and you have to apply yourself. So I spent several years investigating the historicity of the gospel claim. Was it real? The first thing I did is read the historian Josephus. And Josephus was after Christ had died and rose from the dead around 60, 70 A.D. in that time, and he wrote about Jesus and that he was a miracle worker. And then I read what is called the post-apostolic fathers. For instance, John had a disciple named, I forgot his name. Anybody remember? John had a disciple. What was it? Come on, you Bible history people. It just slipped me. It happens. I have a file cabinet full of stuff. But maybe it was Eusebius or Polycarp or one of those guys. Probably Polycarp was the disciple of John, the apostle who walked with Jesus. And so John spoke to Polycarp, and Polycarp and others that were with the disciples wrote down what they learned from the disciples. And if you read the letters of these post-apostolic fathers, and they're to be read, they're historical, you find over 3/4 of what we know to be the New Testament Bible. And then I had the thrill of going to Britain, to the British Museum, and I went and saw what is called the Alexandrian papyrus that's dated to the 3rd century and the 2nd century, which is a fragment of the book of Luke and John. And I had already by that time studied Greek, so I could read that what was written in this papyrus dated back to 170 or 200 was what we have in our Bible today. And that was a thrilling moment for me. And so what was I doing? I was exploring presuppositions. I was exploring historicity. I was exploring reality. What can I know about reality as it really is? And so I want us to learn to think this way. Forgive me if this is just too college sounding, but historically the church has been the pillar and the ground of truth. Newton, Copernicus, and we brought forth incredible revelation about not only about God, but about the world that God created. And so if we go now over to something called 2 Timothy, this was the letter of Paul to Timothy. Paul said to Timothy, "Study, Timothy, to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." Now, that's speaking about the Bible, but it's giving credence to study. We need to study. What's going on? How can I learn what's going on? I have studied about Lipitor and cholesterol because I've been told by my doctor to take cholesterol. And so, okay, I have taken it, but it makes me feel bad. And so I began to do research. I said, I'm going to find out what I can find out on this subject myself, because I had a suspicion that it wasn't all that it's cracked up to be. And it does what it says it'll do, but what else does it do, and why do I need it? And so I began to read in the Journal of American Medicine the peer reviews on research, and I have a science background, so I know how to look and tell if something is a comparative study. That means people are just comparing one thing to another. For instance, if cholesterol shows up at a heart attack, then cholesterol must have caused it, when that may not be true. It has to be proven out through a double-blind study. So I've read the reports to draw a conclusion, at least for myself and my friends and anybody that will listen. I've done that also in the realm of dieting. Now, I love to explore the things of God, but I live in this earthen vessel in this world, and I want my children not to grow up to be sugar addicts. It's a gateway drug, sugar. It'll lead you to Breyer's ice cream and other places, and chocolate-covered donuts. But I want to have something to say, like John Wesley had something to say about diet and medicine. And so I've come to the conclusion from research and from my own personal experience and those of people that I know, that a protein, fat-based diet is going to make you feel so much better, and you're going to be so much lubricated. And it's contrary to what we've been taught. Well, who am I to come against what's been taught? Well, I'm a researcher, and I don't have any problem researching and coming to a conclusion, because God gave me a mind, and He gave one to you, and we all need to learn to research what is called prime source documents. Prime source documents mean you go back to the original. So, Paul said, study to show yourself approved. And then he said, and this is a little verses later, he says, but evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. But continue you in the things which you have learned and have been assured of. In other words, he says, continue in what you've learned and what you have been assured of. Now that means you've got some foundation to it, knowing of whom you have learned these things. So what's very important is to be careful how you hear, who it is that you're listening to, especially if you're not good at sorting through what you hear. You can be swept up and swept away by things that sound good, that are really myth, are slanderous things that have no basis to them, but they sound good, and there's something in us sometimes that wants to delve into things and carry things and pass things, not a virus, but a virus of miscommunication, a virus of things that have no foundation. And so all of us have to stop, step back, and examine what it is that we're looking at, what it is that we're hearing, and take steps. And if you don't know how, you learn how to investigate and to delve in to topics such that you're not carried away. For instance, on Facebook today, there are a lot of people promoting ways to make money, systems they have. And many of these people say, and by the way, I'm a 7-figure man or woman, and we did that in 2 years. And what I think when I hear that is, okay, that's good, but I'd like a little evidence of that. So they show you some checks or something, and I'm saying, well, I'm not sure that that's enough for me. In other words, I just don't believe it because somebody says it, or even because I want to believe it. You know, I've wanted to believe a lot of things. I wanted to believe they were going to work on my car and do it right, so I gave them the money only to find out that they did a crappy job. I wanted to believe that someone that I hired was going to serve in such a way only to find out it was a waste of time, energy, and money. I wanted to believe they were going to set up the crusade and it was going to be glorious, only to find out that there was so much slippage that, I go away with my head hurting. Okay, so my 20 minutes has passed, but I'm going to wrap it up. So as the church, we need to examine all things with the intent of understanding. And we can learn to do that, and we can learn from one another. If you want to know about something, you can ask me about some things. I don't know everything, but I know a little bit about a lot of things, and I can at least stir up your thinking process because we're in relationship. I'm speaking to my Zoom people now. We're in relationship, so we need to talk. Yesterday, I was Zooming with Ken Castrico, and we were talking about this very subject. And he and I have different views on some of this stuff. And my point to him was, let's be willing to talk about it, number one. Number two, let's go look at the facts. Well, he said, I don't have time to look at the facts. I need somebody to do it for me. Well, I said I'd do it for him as much as I can. But the facts aren't always easy to find, and they can seem relative. But don't buy into the idea, church, that everything is relative, because it's not. That's only a philosophy of devils, of demons, that's in the atmosphere. It's in the school system, but it's not true. Everything is not relative, and you prove it to yourself every day. You may think we don't need borders in our country, but you prove the opposite of that because you got borders in your house. Even your skin is a border to the stuff around you, and it only lets in certain things, and you have internal police called an immune system that will destroy things that try to invade your borders. Anyway, I'm just trying to help us open up and get out of the realm of emotional biases and emotional attractions. Like I love Donald Trump. Okay, why do you love him? Well, it's not because I don't see who the man is or was, but I also see other things connected to him that I trust, and then I see the fact-based reality of what he's doing, and it can't be denied. If you stop and look at it, and it makes you angry, then it could be your bias is bigger than the true reality that's confronting you. Doesn't mean there's not trouble. So today is not a pitch for anything. It's a pitch for thinking rationally, for thinking in a way that helps us uncover reality as it really is, so that we're not deluded and deceived and washed away with the masses, so that we can speak up and make a difference in the world around us, because we have not just an opinion on policy that needs to be brought forward, but we have facts to back it up. For instance, socialism, communism, some people love it. They love socialism, but they're people who are uneducated to the reality that they're living in as it really is. Well, Tom, that's awful judgmental. Well, I'm judging spiritual judgment. It's judgment that comes from a fact-based reality informed by the power of the Holy Spirit. But what I say, for instance, talking to Ken yesterday, now I don't want to bore you, but we're talking about free enterprise and the work of the entrepreneur to create business. And I said, well, that's good. You're creating a business. What are you doing? He says, well, I'm looking into a certain kind of fiber that can make clothes. And so I've been doing research. I said, what have you been finding? I'm finding that there is a ton of this stuff being grown in the United States, but there aren't textiles texture mills, text mills that are being able to take the fiber and convert it into useful products. I said, well, you're doing fact-based reality checks. That's great. And I said, when you're a socialist or a communist, it's from the top of an elite who want to distribute your wealth, the wealth of those underneath, according to the way they think it should be. But God never intended it to be that way. He intended that the family would be the foundation of society and of business. And business itself requires that you get in touch with reality as it really is. If you don't, you'll never succeed in your business. Why do I say that? Because I'm saying there are things all around us that are trying to tether us to the way God created the world to be and to work properly. And we have a responsibility to something more than being observers. We must be participants. And we have to be people who know how to go forward, understanding what the presuppositions of business are or is, what the presupposition of education is, what the presupposition of the family is, what the presuppositions of various sciences are. We don't believe in evolution not because we haven't thought about it. I was a biologist, and when I first started, I was considering the whole idea, but when I studied it, I never found one transitional species. In other words, there's no archaeological discoveries of one animal becoming another. It's never happened because everything is what it is. There may be mutations, but never a change of species. Evolution cannot bear up under factual investigation. It just can't. And don't let anybody say that it can. It cannot. And how can I say that? Because if you and I could sit down and examine the reality of life as it really is, that would be the verdict. Now, you can believe whatever you want to believe, and that's where the problem is. Some people suppress the knowledge of truth because they love what they believe. It protects them from having to deal with a holy God in a real world that has something to say to them and about their life and their lifestyle and their idolatry. So there you have that. So I've examined political ideologies, and I don't just believe everything that people say. I've studied the Democratic movement, which is a political ideology. I've studied the Republicans. I see the lies. I see the twisting that's being put in books, things that are factual, that can be proven. But, it's not my job today to try to convince you. I'm just giving you my journey and how I live life. I like to the best of my ability, examine what's put before me.